Welcome. I'm Alice Finnamore. I'm the Minister of Prince William Pastoral Charge in New Brunswick, in Canada. Thank you for joining us, and happy Valentine's Day. Gather us in, ground us in you. Gather us in, ground us in you. Gather us in, ground us in you. Let's pray. Holy One, may your light shine within us and around us as we gather in this virtual fashion. May we feel the presence of Spirit and the presence of each other in this moment. May we know we are one body, even as we worship at a physical distance from each other. May we find blessing and peace. Amen. Our scriptures today, we have two, are both read from the contemporary English version, as we usually do. And the first one is taken from 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 to 18. Not long before the Lord took Elijah up into heaven in a strong wind, Elijah and Elisha were leaving Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "The Lord wants me to go to Bethel, but you must stay here." Elisha replied, "I swear by the living Lord and by my own life that I will stay with you no matter what." And he went with Elijah to Bethel. A group of prophets who lived there asked Elisha, "Do you know that today the Lord is going to take away your master?" "Yes, I do," Elisha answered, "but don't remind me of it." Elijah then said, "Elisha, now the Lord wants me to go to Jericho, but you must stay here." Elisha replied, "I swear by the living Lord and by your own life that I will stay with you no matter what." And he went with Elijah to Jericho. A group of prophets who lived there asked Elisha, "Do you know that today the Lord is going to take away your master?" "Yes, I do," Elisha answered, "but don't remind me of it." Elijah then said to Elisha, "Now the Lord wants me to go to the Jordan River, but you must stay here." Elisha replied, "I swear by the living Lord and by your own life that I will never leave you." So the two of them walked on together. 50 prophets followed Elijah and Elisha from Jericho, then stood at a distance and watched as the two men walked toward the river. When they got there, Elijah took off his coat. Then he rolled it up and struck the water with it. At once a path opened through the river, and the two of them walked across on dry ground. After they had reached the other side, Elijah said, "Elisha, the Lord will soon take me away. What can I do for you before this happens?" Elisha answered, "Please give me twice as much of your power as you give to the other prophets, so that I can be the one who takes your place as their leader." "It won't be easy," Elijah answered. "It can happen only if you see me as I am being taken away." Elijah and Elisha were walking along and talking when suddenly there appeared between them a flaming chariot pulled by fiery horses. Right away, a strong wind took Elijah up into heaven. Elisha saw this and shouted, "Israel's chariot and cavalry have taken my master away." After Elijah had gone, Elisha tore his clothes in sorrow. Elijah's coat had fallen off, so Elisha picked it up and walked back to the Jordan River. He struck the water with the coat and wondered, "Will the Lord perform miracles for me as he did for Elijah?" As soon as Elisha did this, a dry path opened up through the water, and he walked across. When the prophets from Jericho saw what happened, they said to each other, "Elisha now has Elijah's power." They walked over to him, bowed down, and said, "There are 50 strong men here with us. Please let us go look for your master. Maybe the Spirit of the Lord carried him off to some mountain or valley." "No," Elisha replied, "they won't find him." They kept begging until he was embarrassed to say no. He finally agreed, and the prophets sent the men out. They took 3 days. They looked for 3 days for Elijah, but never found him. They returned to Jericho, and Elisha said, "I told you that you wouldn't find him." Our second reading is from Mark chapter 9, verses 2 through to 9. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him. They went up on a high mountain where they could be alone. There, in front of the disciples, Jesus was completely changed, and his clothes became much whiter than any bleach on earth could make them. Then Moses and Elijah were there talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Teacher, it's good for us to be here. Let us make 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But Peter and the others were terribly frightened, and he did not know what he was talking about. The shadow of a cloud passed over and covered them. From a cloud, a voice said, "This is my son, and I love him. Listen to what he says." At once the disciples looked around, and they saw only Jesus. As Jesus and his disciples were coming down the mountain, he told them not to say a word about what they had seen until the Son of Man had been raised from death. May our spirits be blessed by these words from our ancient scriptures. It's Valentine's Day, as well as Transfiguration Sunday. Usually on Valentine's, we think about romance, chocolate, flowers, candlelit dinners. On Transfiguration Sunday, we think about the story of Jesus and his 3 friends and how they went up on the mountain for a private retreat. But things didn't turn out quite the same. They were quite different than any of the 3 friends had ever experienced or expected. There on the mountaintop, Jesus transformed into the glorious being that he truly was. Even his clothes glowed white. And with Jesus, they saw Moses and Elijah. Why Moses and Elijah? Was this experience, this documentation, designed to show that Jesus was on the same spiritual level as Moses and Elijah with his teaching? On the same level as the law and the prophets? Was it meant to link Jesus to these 2 men who tradition said had died, but whose bodies were never found, with no known grave to gather tourists or pilgrims? A foreshadowing of the resurrection. And what were they talking about before God's voice came through a cloud? It's to say how well loved Jesus was. Whatever the purpose of the event and the story that developed around it, Jesus said not to tell anyone about it. Not yet. Some things just don't make sense until the whole story is played out. And I'm guessing the whole story is not played out even yet. We are still left guessing and wondering. We did read that story this morning, but I want to draw your attention to the other story, the story about Elijah and Elisha. Elijah lived about 900 years before Jesus, about 3,000 years ago. Even now, for our Jewish friends, he is probably the most loved prophet. Even now it is said that he comes to help Jews who are in trouble. Even now he is said to inspire Jewish scholars. He's present at circumcision ceremonies, and a place is set for him at every home at the Passover meal. Finally, another prophet, Malachi, wrote that Elijah would return to signal the arrival of the Messiah. Yet another reason why Elijah may have been present with Jesus on that mountain retreat. That in itself would be a secret that Jesus did not want them to talk about. But the real hero of today's story from 2 Kings is not Elijah, but his successor, Elisha. The names are so similar. You might keep them straight by alphabet. The J in Elijah comes before the SH and Elisha. A few chapters earlier in 1 Kings chapter 19, if you want to read about it, God sent Elijah to a certain farm where he was to find a young fellow named Elisha. Then Elijah was to put his cloak on Elisha's shoulders to signal that Elisha was going to become Elijah's successor, his student and his successor. He did as instructed and found Elisha in the field, working hard with 11 other men, plowing, guiding oxen and plows to prepare the land. I once commented about a high school class that my mother taught in Stanley High before she married my daddy. I remarked about the number of students who went on to become medical doctors and get their PhDs. Daddy laughed. It's either that or work in the woods, he said. Maybe that was the sort of thing that was on Elisha's mind too when he got the tap on the shoulder from Elijah to study under the great Elijah and wear that mantle of prophecy after Elijah's death. What an opportunity for a farm boy. Elisha immediately agreed. He accepted. He went to say goodbye to his family, but not only that, he celebrated by slaughtering his oxen and cooking them up on a fire built with the wood that had been his plow. Very clearly, he was signaling that he was not coming back to farming. He was committed to this new life. He was committing himself hook, line, and sinker to Elijah. After they ate this very significant meal, Elijah and Elisha set off into the future. We don't hear about Elisha again until the story that we read this morning. About 7 or 8 years had passed, in which Elijah tutored and mentored Elisha while dealing with matters of national importance. Then, at the beginning of our story today, we read how it was almost time for Elijah's life to end. The two prophets were leaving Gilgal, and Elijah told his student Elisha that he should not follow him. He was to go on alone. He had to go alone. "No," said Elisha, "I won't leave you." 3 times this conversation happened. Elijah kept saying that he was going on alone, and Elisha kept on refusing to stay behind. We don't know why Elijah wanted to be alone. He was old. He knew he was on his way to meet God. Was he like an old dog going off on his own to die in peace? Was he like a lot of seniors who don't want to be a burden to their loved ones? Or was he testing Elisha's commitment? Nothing could keep Elisha from his mentor. He loved him deeply. He did not want to think about losing him. Other prophets that they met along the way kept saying, "Don't you know that he's going to die today?" And Elisha said yes, but he didn't want to think about it. He didn't want to talk about it. Elijah may be about to die, but he was still alive. "I don't want to talk about losing him," Elisha was saying. "Don't talk about him as if he's already gone. Don't remind me of how little time I have left." This is love. This is devotion. It may be a different kind of love than we usually talk about on Valentine's Day, but it was a deep spiritual connection between teacher and student, between Elijah and his spiritual son, who had been with him all those years. Death was at the door. Others watched from a distance, but Elisha insisted on being there, being present, being true to his commitment to the very end. They left Gilgal. We aren't sure which Gilgal this was, but we do know about Bethel and Jericho and Jordan. These destinations were historic sites. It was like Elijah was making one last pilgrimage. Bethel was the place where Jacob had dreamed about the ladder to heaven, the place where Jacob had first met God, first truly met God on his own spiritual journey. The place where Jacob started to transform and become a spiritual leader. The place where Jacob began his transformation. Jericho was the first city that the people of Israel conquered after the Exodus. It was the first victory in the land of Canaan, their first adventure in the Promised Land. It was here that this ragtag bunch of nomads in the desert began to transform into an army and a nation. But Elijah needed to go farther. He felt called to go beyond the Jordan River to a place that was only wasteland, a dry and dusty place where whirlwinds blew and the landscape itself could transform. It was only there, in some unnamed place, some ordinary place, that Elisha and Elijah's own transfigurations and transformations were about to occur. It's almost time, Elijah said. Before I go, is there anything else that I can give you? Anything else that I can give to you? Yes, said Elisha. Bless me with a double portion of your spirit, your power. Perhaps it should have been already evident that Elisha would succeed Elijah as the head prophet, but Elisha wanted it to be very clear. The double portion was the inheritance of the firstborn. A double portion of Elisha's spirit would honor Elisha's place as his spiritual son and show that he would be the new leader. Elisha did not want to presume. He did not want trouble or questions about his leadership. Was Elisha the true heir to Elijah's position? It won't be easy, Elijah replied. You have to see me being taken away. You have to keep your eyes open. You have to remain open-hearted and courageous. You have to be able to stand here in the presence of God and keep your center. You know how sometimes we don't want to look at the hard things in life. You know how we look away from pain. You know how we get distracted and tired. Elijah and Elisha had been walking for a long time, carrying the heaviness of coming loss. You know how sometimes when you're walking, you keep your eyes down at your feet on the path, watching your step, instead of looking around you, but not Elisha. He kept his head up. He kept his focus. He kept his eyes on his teacher and did not look away. What he saw was a flaming chariot and fiery horses. What he saw was a whirlwind, a strong wind in the wake of the chariot, lifting Elijah up and away. What Elisha called out, according to the contemporary English version, was, Israel's cavalry and chariots have taken my master away. But the footnote says, Master, You were like cavalry and chariots for the people of Israel. Years later, when Elijah himself was on his deathbed, the king, Jehoash, exclaimed, Master, what will Israel's chariots and cavalry be able to do without you? That was the grief that Elisha felt at losing his master, Elijah. How could they go on without the power of Elijah's leadership? Perhaps Elijah's spirit was itself envisioned as the flaming chariot and the fiery horses. His spirit was taken up and his body disappeared in the wind, and Elisha was left alone. He tore his clothes in grief. Elisha was transformed through that grief. Elisha was himself transfigured, changing from student to leader in a moment in the presence of God. He cried out in his grief, but he kept his eyes open. He found Elijah's cloak, picked it up, and walked back the way that he had come. The change in him was so evident that the prophets at Jericho immediately recognized that the power of Elijah now sat on Elisha's shoulders. This story plays out on two sides of the Jordan River. Crossing the Jordan marked new beginnings as well as endings. It was a place where the people of Israel died to their nomadic life, and in crossing over became something new in the Promised Land. It was a place where eventually John the Baptist, himself a reminder of Elijah the prophet, asked people to let go of their old ways and enter into the new through baptism. It's the river that marks the end of life, metaphorically, like in the Johnny Cash song about not having to cross the Jordan alone. Or the old hymn, He leadeth me. And when my task on earth is done, when by thy grace my victory's won, even death's cold wave I will not flee, since God through Jordan leadeth me. It was the end of Elijah's life. When he went across the Jordan, he was not alone. It was also the end of Elisha's life as a student. He too did not go alone, crossing back with the double portion of Elijah's spirit. And beyond that, this journey of Elisha and Elijah represented the end of one era and the beginning of another. It was a major leadership change. Everyone knew that it was coming. It was a time of uncertainty for many, I expect, as no one knew for sure what would happen when Elijah was no longer there to lead them forward. Yet it was clearly a time of change. We are on the edge of change too. We have climate change and changes due to the pandemic. We are told that we are in an age of pandemics, not something that we want to talk about or think about long term. Just like Elisha said to all those who tried to warn him that all these things were going to happen. We watch as the U.S. struggles through a change of government, and as Europe and Britain face a new post-Brexit era. We have impending changes in our churches too, as our people age, and not just in our congregations, but in churches everywhere. There is a new era coming, and this time of uncertainty with COVID is forcing us to let go of things that usually stabilize us We want to look away from all that. We want to look back at how things were in years past, the way things used to be, all those happy memories. We want to pretend that major change is not happening and that somehow we will get back to normal. But it could very well be that there will be no return to the old ways. It could very well be that we have crossed the Jordan, metaphorically, into a wilderness that will transform us. Can we be like Elijah and stick with it? Can we be present and alert through this? Can we be brave enough to ask for and look for a blessing in the middle of all of this loss and grief? Perhaps Elisha's urgent plea to not talk about it was an appropriate response, to go in silence and contemplation through this massive change that would shake the foundations of the schools of the prophets. Like Elijah, we are on the shore of change. In this time between eras, in this time between times, we too must be alert. We too must be present. We too must walk with our eyes open and be able to see the presence of God in the details of the trauma surrounding us. Then perhaps we too will be transformed. Perhaps we too will find ourselves living in new power. May we too pick up the cloak of our spiritual ancestors and travel on with our God into whatever is the next new thing, knowing that we too are blessed. Amen. He leadeth me, O blessed thought, O words with heavenly comfort fraught. Whate'er I do, where'er I be, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me, he leadeth me, by his own hand he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. Sometimes mid scenes of deepest gloom, sometimes where Eden's bowers bloom, by waters calm or troubled sea, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. Lord, I would clasp my hand in thine, nor ever murmur nor repine, content whatever lot I see, since God, my God, leadeth me. And when my task on earth is done, when by thy grace the victory's won, even death's cold wave, I will not flee, since God through Jordan leadeth me. He leadeth me, he leadeth me, by his own hand he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me. Let's pray. Holy One, you lead us. You lead us in our daily journeys, and you lead us across the Jordan, both the Jordan representing the end of our lives and the Jordan that is any major change we face. In the story of how the people of Israel first crossed the Jordan into the Promised Land, we remember that the Ark of the Covenant went into the water first. The people knew they were not alone because the Ark meant the great God of Israel was there too. There are so many things we do not understand in our lives and in our scriptures, but this we know, that if we keep our eyes open, we will see the many ways in which we are led step by step through our transformation. Often it is only on looking back that we see it. Sometimes others see it before we do, like the sons of the prophets saw how changed Elisha was, even from a distance. As we think of how Elisha stayed at the side of his beloved mentor, we ask for the courage to stay at the side of those we love through the difficulties and griefs of these days now. Sometimes it seems easier to look away, to pretend that certain things are not coming to an end. We do not want to think about what is ending. We want to hang on, just like Elisha wanted to hang on to every moment of his student life before he was expected to step into new roles and responsibilities, before he had to say goodbye to the man who had been his spiritual support and guide. We do not know where our current process of transformation is taking us. We only ask that the transformation, both personal and congregational, even global, be not just a transformation, but a transfiguration, so that those with eyes to see may recognize what is true. Just as Peter, James, and John were privileged to see what was true about Jesus. May we, like Elisha, stand true to our spiritual ancestors. May we, like Elisha, be alert, present. May we be able to see God in the details of our circumstances. May we know that we too are blessed. We are grateful for the blessing of health and good leadership. We are grateful that we can pray for our neighbors and reach out to comfort. We continue to pray for those around the world who are sick, for the healthcare workers and others who labor on day after day. We pray for our loved ones and friends who are ill, and those who are awaiting surgery and who are in treatment or awaiting treatment. May their medical teams be wise in their decisions and careful in their work. May health and strength return. May we all be supported and encouraged in our care for each other. We pray for students and teachers. May the plans to protect them be effective. May we all continue in hope and expectation. In all things for which we pray, give us grace and wisdom for the sake of Jesus, the Christ, who taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. May the light of Christ bless you and keep you in love this Valentine's Day. Thank you for joining us. Amen.